So today we're covering cognitive development, particularly Jean Piaget's theory of development. So cognitive development then focuses on thinking and how children progress through different stages according to Piaget's theory in terms of becoming more and more sophisticated in their thinking. So first, before we move into the theory, Jean Piaget stated that cognitive development consists of two adaptive processes where children are adapting their thinking to new observations or new things that they're exposed to in the environment. So children engage in a process of assimilation, where they absorb new information into existing cognitive structures. They also engage in a process called accommodation, where you modify your existing cognitive structures when you learn new information. Okay, so let's say that an example of assimilation here, a child is exposed to a zebra, and the child sees the zebra for the first time and says, horse. So a zebra looks kind of like a horse, right? They're absorbing that new piece of information, that zebra, into the existing cognitive structure that horses are relatively large animals, they have hair, and they have 4 legs. So that's the process of assimilation. The child might realize, though, that they need to modify that cognitive structure of horse to accommodate this new information. So eventually the child will learn that a zebra, although it looks kind of like a horse, is not exactly a horse. And so they need to create a new cognitive structure to account for zebra as the new category. So there are 4 stages of cognitive development according to Piaget. The first stage is the sensorimotor stage. And in the sensorimotor stage, if we break this term down, we see that it involves your senses and motor movement. Okay, so Piaget believed that the child learns about the environment by using your senses and motor movement. So coordinating sensory information with bodily movements. That's how the child thinks in this stage. So think about infants that you've been around. If you give an infant something to play with, the first thing that they do is put it into their mouth, right? They're coordinating that movement, putting it into their mouth, and then using their senses to be able to explore. The major accomplishment in this stage is something called object permanence. Object permanence is this understanding that even though you can't see an object, it still exists, right? The object exists permanently even if you can't see it. So early, up till about 6 months of age, if a child's playing with something, you don't want them to play with it, you can take it, put it in your pocket, put it in a drawer, hide it, and they think it's gone, right? They think that it's disappeared. But once a child achieves object permanence, they will continue to look for the object, right? Because they know that even though they can't see it, it still does exist. Stage 2, the pre-operational stage. This is between about ages 2 to 7. And for all of these stages here, the age range is approximate. So some kids will reach this stage earlier than 2 years of age. Some kids will reach it slightly after 2 years of age. So just know that these are approximations. In the pre-operational stage, children still lack cognitive abilities that are necessary for abstractions and for these abstract mental operations. Piaget believed that kids in this stage are very egocentric, meaning that they can't see things from any perspective except for their own. They're very limited in terms of being able to see something from somebody else's point of view. In the pre-operational stage, children cannot grasp this concept of what's called conservation. Conservation is this idea that even though the appearance of something might change, the physical properties of it do not change. So I want you to watch the video here showing this conservation tasks with a child who's in the preoperational stage and then with a child who is in the concrete operation stage, so that you can see the difference in grasping this concept of conservation. Kids in the preoperational stage do not understand this particular concept, so they don't get that just because it looks like something is covering more surface area doesn't mean that there's more of it. The physical property doesn't exactly change, even though the way it looks has changed. So there are a number of different tasks that children can do looking at conservation. So you see here that, let's say for this one on substance, we could have a ball of Play-Doh. And if we show the child the ball of Play-Doh and then compare it to the line of Play-Doh and say which one has more, the child will invariably pick the one that looks like it covers more surface area, even though they know that, even though they have seen you just change it in that respect. In the concrete operation stage, ages 7 to 12, kids are still grounded by concrete experiences, but now they get conservation, right? They understand conservation, and they also understand cause and effect. And in the final stage, stage 4, the formal operation stage, this is age 12 to adulthood, where children become capable of using this abstract reasoning. So they can move beyond the concrete. So concrete reasoning is largely tied to things that are tangible, things you can see, things you can touch, things you can directly experience. And young children seem to be limited to reasoning using those concrete forms. As children continue to develop their cognitive capacities, they can reason about things that are abstract, things that you can't quantify, things that you can't see, that you can't touch, that you haven't directly experienced. So, for example, you can start to think about what it might be like to grow up in a country that's undergoing a civil war right now. You can plan for your potential future. You can systematically, through trial and error, search for a solution to a particular problem. So Piaget's theory then has been around for a long time in developmental psychology. But there are some potential problems in terms of how widely the theory is accepted today. So Piaget proposed that children go through these very discrete steps or stages. However, it seems that cognitive capacity, your ability to think in a more sophisticated manner, occurs in these kind of continuous overlapping waves, as opposed to you're in stage 1, suddenly you're in stage 2. It seems to be more continuous than what Piaget allowed for. Also, we said that preschool kids are very egocentric, according to Piaget's theory. They have a hard time seeing things from someone else's viewpoint. That is not entirely true, though, right? If you work directly with preschool children, they can become very good at understanding a problem from someone else's perspective. Additionally, Piaget may have underestimated the abilities of children. So children, even infants, have cognitive abilities that arise much earlier than Piaget had accounted for. So children can be much more sophisticated in their thinking earlier on than what Piaget had proposed. And additionally, that cognitive development is influenced by a child's culture and by education. So in Piaget's theory, he believed that formal operations is the highest level of cognitive reasoning, of cognitive capacity. And we see now that reaching this formal operations level is largely dependent on going through a Western school system. And for individuals who have never been exposed to this Western style of education, they might never reach the formal operations stage. But does that mean that they don't have the capacity to do it? Certainly not. It just means that perhaps they haven't had the experiences that would allow them to reach that degree of cognitive sophistication.